You know, I have talked here and privately, mostly privately, but all of you who have read me in the past or know about what I roll to, what I gravitate to, and I have said repeatedly, is the fact that I find it to be an outrage that San Francisco and the Bay Area in general is devoid of a news talk radio station. Now I know that most terrestrial radio is dying. It's dead. It's a it's a fast dying medium where simply the money isn't there, the advertising, which is the heart and soul of any media outlet these days, is not there. But creativity and the ability to market with what you got and not bitch and moan about what you don't got. I've always stated that's why, folks, New York still has talk radio, a top 10 market like San Francisco. That's why LA has multiple stations still doing talk, and Chicago, and Philadelphia, Houston, Miami, Boston. You can go on and on and on and on. San Francisco, Nope, not one. And don't tell me about KQED. They don't count. They do very limited local programming, and they certainly don't do any kind of traditional news talk. They're not a public station anyway. We all know what the future is for public TV and radio, courtesy of the Trump administration, which is a whole nother topic that I'm not going to get into. But what I do want to discuss in this broadcast is the fact that there are people within this area and near Silicon Valley who have the financial wherewithal to get a San Francisco news talk presence back into shape where it could thrive and, dare I say, almost be very successful, because you have a market of people who are considered older, but they nevertheless are former KGO radio listeners who are still alive, who still yearn for the days when news talk was something that we rallied around, that we were able to talk and discuss news items, some super news items every day. And we had the old KGO, even the new KGO at the time, around to where we could discuss things, politics, breaking news events, culture, entertainment, comedy, Broadway plays, whatever. And now we have nothing. And I find that ridiculous. I find it pathetic, outrageous. The people that have been discussing behind the scenes about the idea of having a frequency, and there's plenty out there, both on the AM and the FM, about getting the money together, and it's not a lot of money in today's world, are broadcast people, some of whom have retired, some of whom have gone on from their broadcast experience into more of a advocacy role and consulting role. I'm going to give you the names: Jim Gabbert and Mickey Luckoff. They're not alone, but they are the two major players. Let's start with Gabbert. Gabbert ran K101. He was the advent behind the technology at the time of FM radio. Basically, had new technology and programming and ran it. Okay, I don't want to get deep. You pretty much know Jim Gabbert, TV 20, which he sold for a huge profit. Okay, and he's been in the relative background, hasn't been public. Well, he's damn near, 85, 90 years old. I don't have the exact age. Still lucid, still active, and has talked about rejuvenating a KGO-like frequency on either AM or FM. Jim Gabbert. And of course, he has money. I'll give you another one. A guy used to run KGO Radio. Very prominent broadcaster, ABC exec, was at KGO along with Jack Swanson. Knew how to run and program KGO from its early days to its heydays. And I'm talking, of course, about Mickey Luckoff. Mickey Luckoff, who now ironically runs radio stations in the Midwest, but not here. Why? That's a good question. You could get frequencies these days. There's the old KFRC. There's KSFO. There's existing stations and frequencies that could be had, even on the FM. Both Luckoff and Gabbert have talked a lot. Emphasis on talk. Talked quite a bit. But now their talk is cheap. And the reason why I'm calling them out publicly now is because I believe in action. Action, the old saying goes, speaks louder than words. This is not something anew. I myself have been talking to various people, trying to put together a coalition of folks who have the money, the wherewithal, the juice, so to speak, to get something done, to get a frequency, to get something equivalent to what is going on in New York and Chicago and Philadelphia and Boston and LA and Houston and Miami. But it is not bizarre, ridiculous, and pathetic enough not taking place in the Bay Area. And that is a news talk station. And I'm talking about nothing extravagant. And I'm not talking about a new KGO. That ship has sailed. I'm talking about something akin to a rollout 2025 of a station has local hosts, 4 or 5, who talk about the news, who have specialties in podcasting, in politics, culture, entertainment, the news itself. Like, say, a John Rothman, who used to be a host on KGO. Like a Pat Thurston, a woman who had a great show in the middle of the day and had interesting guests and had news talk. And boy, oh boy, an outlet to where you could discuss the news. You could talk to guests who are experts on various things. I mentioned Thurston, who was close to a woman named Loretta Lynch, who was the past president of the California PUC, knew the inner workings of PG&E and how they misbegot profits and common sense in order to get higher profits for their own executives. In any of that was just one subject matter. But it was Thurston who had on Loretta Lynch, who knew what was going on at PG&E, used to run the CPUC. That was just one topic. It was Thurston who knew about politics like Rothman, who'd have on interesting guests and people in the news. You can still do this. Doesn't cost a lot of money. We're talking about couple of $1 million. Maybe I'm off $1 million or $2 million, but the bottom line is this. There is a vast audience in the Bay Area, San Francisco especially, the Peninsula, the South Bay, near, Silicon Valley, where they have vast amounts of money and capital, where still people who remember the old KGO and how KGO was a talk pioneer. But that was years ago. And yes, we have reality today, and the fact that radio is pretty much dead. But radio, like anything else, there is timing, there is tweaking, and the fact of the matter is there is no creative person, but there is. There is. And you could still market a successful station. Maybe it doesn't make money right away, but it won't lose money. But you have the financial resources. And both Gabbert, who talks quite a bit, I know, I've talked to him, and Luckoff, who I haven't spoken to, but I know about Luckoff, and I know about the fact that he has stations that he runs today, not in the Bay Area. What is going on here? Nothing. Again, stop the bullshit and get your ass in a room and talk and create. Be creative. Mr. Gabbert, you're a fan of retro, but you're also a fan of realism. I get that. And you make money, and you've made money, and you're worried about your money even as you progress towards age 91. It was you, Mr. Gabbert, who did an American Bandstand-like program on TV 20 for years and years that a lot of people watched. A lot of people told you, oh, you're not going to do that because it's not going to make any money. Nobody cares about shows like that anymore. You know what? They cared. And I'm using that little program called Dance Party as evidence, proof positive that if you market something right, and if you do it with fiscal conservatism and watch what you're doing and take advantage of the built-in audience that you still have today in San Francisco and beyond, but mostly San Francisco, then you can do and launch a successful news talk outlet. Look at the guy in New York who had money available, who believed in that mantra, and now has a WABC, which is vital enough. Not the leader in the market, but is 11th. There are a lot of radio stations in New York City. WABC, back in business, thank God. But it took a billionaire, but nevertheless a guy who remembered the old WABC. Didn't care for much WOR, but fact of the matter is WOR is still there too. Granted, New York is the number one market, but it proves positive that you put something out, people will listen to it, particularly here, where so many people are fans, are news savvy, and want to hear about politics, and want to hear about the Middle East. So, Mr. Luckoff, of all people, yes, I've derided you. Yes, I've chastised you, as I did Ron Owens, but at least Ron had a career. Ron had built up a reputation being successful of interviewing celebrities and newsmakers and news talk, political, etc., as did Rothman. There is a market. You don't have to go crazy and hogwash and spend millions upon millions and millions and millions of dollars. That's part of the reason why you're successful, Luckoff and Mr. Gabbert, because you know where the money goes and you fiscally have prowess. We get all that. But don't talk a bunch of shit and not follow up. That's what's commonly referred to as bullshit. You have the wherewithal. You have the guidance. You have the moxie. I think, prove me wrong otherwise. And folks out there who know what I'm talking about, who are working the industry or maybe outside the industry, but you still know the fact that these guys, I don't want them to talk a lot and not be accountable. So I hope they get this message, and I think they will, because I know that they watch this every now and then. We have to get back in the business. And if it's not on the front of Mr. Gabbert and Luckoff, then I know there's people out there who miss KGO, the old KGO. but are nevertheless are wired, are, shall we say, have connections, no pun intended. Because maybe Mr. Gabbert does like to talk a lot. I've heard that. Same thing for Luckoff. Maybe they're not interested in an investment that would be a pittance compared to their overall wealth, particularly Gabbert's. But I wanted to put it on the record that they are out there, that they have talked quite a bit. But when push came to shove, well, I'll leave it up to your summation.